Testing. Hello. Beautiful. Welcome back, guys. Today I thought I'd talk about muscle imbalances. This is actually the second time taking this because the camera died last time, but here we go, take two. I have written an essay on this, which you can find in the link in the description, or you can go to www.dantesinese.com. So, muscle imbalances. What do? How do they occur and how do we fix them? So a muscle imbalance, as the name implies, is a difference in the size or strength of the muscle on one side relative to the other. This can happen for two reasons. One of them is that we tend to have a preference to a single side, so we tend to develop that more. And the second is we just tend to have a natural genetic asymmetry as a part of being human and our anatomy. But we'll talk about that one later. So in terms of the side preference, we all have a side dominance. So when we start learning skills, we have one side that is probably more comfortable than the other. For example, I hold this mic in the left hand, not my right hand, in every single video. I don't know if anyone's paying attention, because it feels more comfortable. So with consciously or unconsciously, I'm probably developing my left arm by staying in this position more than my right arm. Now, we all have this, and this is the reason why we start writing with one hand relative to the other. So when you started picking up a pen and or pencil, you probably had a preference in comfort from one side to the other, and you continue to develop that. So when we're learning a skill, you actually have comfort on one side, and then that difference in skill level or performing that task vastly, it gets exacerbated by the practice of that skill. So unless you wanted the imbalance to be less pronounced, you would have to consciously do on equal sides practicing a skill, but we don't often do that. For example, in the writing example, you know, we learn skills for the necessity for performing the task, not necessarily for the sake of performing the task. So what do I mean by that? Like when you're learning to write, you write because you need to be able to write, communicate in a written format. So you just learn the task to be able to do it. Whereas a gymnast whose performance or their sport requires a demonstration of a certain set of routines in both ways, is for the sake of executing the skill, they need to develop that evenly. So they practice on both sides because they need to be competent in both sides and equal on both sides. It's a very symmetrical sport. Well, the same thing with powerlifting, like you're performing lifts symmetrically. So a squat, a bench and a deadlift, your feet are lined up straight in every single repetition, or the hands in the bench case. So yeah, when you're learning a skill, you do it for the sake of executing a skill, not for the sake of the skill itself. And it's difficult and requires conscious effort to iron out these differences in when learning a skill, or to consciously practice both sides, reducing the exacerbation of imbalance on either side. My personal example of this is actually skating. So when I was learning to skate, I purposely learned, well, this isn't a skating lesson, but you put one foot on the front of the skateboard and pedal with your opposite foot, right? I learned to skate with both feet being able to be the foot at the front and both feet with being able to be the one that pedals. I purposely did that because it meant that I could skate longer and cruise longer, because I usually used it for transport. It took me a little bit longer in the initial phases, but now it's something that I can perform symmetrically. However, I still do have a preference on the side that I do skate. So there is always going to be probably one side that is slightly more comfortable than the other. So you'll probably still slightly favor one side relative to the other, but it's the idea about minimizing the differences. So for example, so that's just in performing a skill or a task. Now, if you extrapolate this out, right, let's say you have a bricklayer, and let's say the bricklayer bends down on his right knee every time to pick up a brick, and he's pushing up from his left leg to stand up. You know, his left quad is going to be much more dominant, because times this by 5, 10, 100, 1,000, hundreds of thousands of times, picking up bricks and laying the bricks, you know, there's going to be then a performance difference in one leg relative to the other. And then you're probably going to see a size difference, one leg relative to the other, just from repetitions, and because it's more comfortable one side relative to the other. And then that, continuing on from what I said before, the fact that he's done so many repetitions on one side relative to the other exacerbates it more, because then you'll continue to do that on one side relative to the other. So yeah, if you do find yourself in this position, what would I go about doing? I would start by changing any bilateral exercises. So bilateral meaning exercises involving both sides of the body. and changing it for unilateral, so exercise that are from one side of the body. So for example, I would change a Romanian deadlift to a single leg Romanian deadlift and make sure I perform that with a longer time under tension or an equal time under tension on both sides of the body by concentrating on the lagging side. And then I would try to ensure that the mind-muscle connection, so concentrating on the actual execution of every repetition, is equal on the both sides of the body, so it is symmetrical. You're going to find that one side probably will be weaker than the other, and if you stay at the same weight, so a weight that is weaker for one side but difficult for the other side, you'll find the discrepancy will start to even out with time, and you'll find that that mind-muscle connection will start to get a bit better on the lagging side. As well as that, I would also probably choose an even distribution of exercises where you feel the mind-muscle connection to stimulate the growth, because you don't want to forget the other side. And what I mean by that, basically it means we do have asymmetries and we do feel things slightly different for whatever reason. Like when I do a standing alternating curl, I feel it more on my left bicep, but when I do a standing cable curl, I feel it more on my right bicep. So I just make sure I get both in there, so it's more bicep volume full stop, but I do get the mind-muscle connection equally on both sides in that workout. You know, now going back to the genetic component or the anatomy component, you know, we are asymmetrical creatures, and people think that just because we appear to be symmetrical on the exterior, that we should be symmetrical all the time, but that's not necessarily true. We just appear mostly symmetrical, but you know, even if you just look at our organs, you know, our heart sits on one side relative to the other, our stomach, our liver, our kidney, everything sits, you know, asymmetrically. It's just we appear on the exterior that we should be symmetrical, so we think we should be all the time, but there is going to be slight asymmetry. So, like for example, some people have, you know, one pec that attaches slightly lower than the other pec, or some people you'll see that their abdomen are slightly staggered, which mine are. And it's just an example of how, you know, attachment points of the muscles into the joints, just an anatomic thing, just a biological thing, can demonstrate some of these imbalances. So you might not actually have a size discrepancy in the muscle, but it might purely just be the way it attaches into the joint anatomically is slightly different. And that's not really something you can change. If you did want to try work on that, then you could try and make the muscle belly, the size of the muscle on the side that appears smaller, to be a bit bigger, but then you would actually have a size discrepancy, but it might appear to then have been evened out. So yeah, I hope that helped. So to recap, if you were to try fix this, I would change to unilateral exercises, so exercises on one side of the body, and I would focus on the time under tension for those repetitions. I would keep the weight at a weight that is easy for one side but difficult for the lagging side, and I would focus on developing the mind-muscle connection between the lagging side until you start to feel it evenly on both sides. Yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Please drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, yeah, if you just enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe. It goes a long way for the channel. So yeah, I hope you have a fantastic day, night, evening, whatever it is where you are. So yeah, peace.